hello, everyone who is lurking in the chat and or watching in the future. And we are fully getting into classical reception month with an episode of Star Trek that, upon rewatch, probably gave Noodle an aneurysm or two.
A minor heart attack. Minor.
No, don't talk about heart attacks. No, we'll stay away
No.
from that.
Yeah, we'll stay away from that one. But yeah, if I have opinions.
Yeah.
I have opinions, Gene Roddenberry. You and me, bud. You and me, bud.
The comment that comes from that is, when don't you have opinions?
Yeah.
Yeah, if that ever happens, you probably should check me into a hospital.
So
We can share a room.
Here's a quick question. In your opinion, who did classical reception better, Gene Roddenberry or the Channel Punching Bag?
Damn it, Ring! You got that before us.
That was quick.
I mean, for authenticity, I don't think Gene Roddenberry's done that badly. But for making it very unsubtly a dig at Christianity rather than actual Hellenic polytheism, Gene Roddenberry, if you've got a problem with Christianity, just say that. Don't wrap it up in ancient Greek toga and put gold on it. And this is the problem. This is what a lot of things that do classical reception do.
Yeah. To be fair, you didn't have to wrap Yahweh up in an ancient Greek toga because that's mostly how they thought he looked anyway. So
yeah, but the thing is, when a lot of modern writers do ancient Greek worship, ancient Greek gods, they always pick Apollo because Apollo is the one who, beat for beat, is the closest to Christianity. There's still some weirdness, but the way he was worshipped is the closest to Christianity. And he's the deity of healing and of music and of all those good things.
Yeah.
And he had a human wife, or multiple human wives, actually. Human women. Had human children. He had a son who was a healer who went against the gods and pissed off Hades and got himself murdered by Zeus, who sacrificed himself to protect humanity. Apollo was already very Christian.
Yeah.
The most Christian you get in ancient Hellenism that isn't is Asclepius.
Yeah.
Who is that deity? I was just talking about the guy who sacrificed himself.
Yeah.
But again, so what a lot of writers like to do, they'll take Christianity, they'll give it a funny hat, they'll dress it up in a toga instead of in whatever the hell Jesus had going on.
Yeah.
And they'll call it ancient Greek Hellenism. And ancient Greek Hellenism is nothing like on the surface. Yeah. You're worshipping a god. You're part of a cult. Apollo was, of course, the sun god eventually. Colors of gold and brightness. That is authentic to people in a Christian worldview.
Yeah.
Because it basically looks like late Roman, early medieval Catholicism.
Yeah.
What it looks like. And to a modern audience, that's just far removed enough that it's foreign without being so foreign that they can't follow it.
Yeah.
And so they basically take the Yahweh from about 700 AD, call him Apollo, and make him 12 foot tall.
Yeah.
Basically what they do, and they do it all the time. They do it, if you watch Troy, the worship of Apollo in that, again, is very much Christianity. It's academics will call it Christianity in a funny hat.
Yeah.
Whereby it's not it's not Hellenism. It's someone's got Christianity and made it look a little bit Greek, a little bit weird, a little bit silly,
Yeah.
and it's leaning into that. So it's not Hellenism, but for a modern audience who's not versed in Hellenism,
Yeah.
it's authentic to what they think Hellenism would have looked like. And it's foreign enough, it taps into that feeling of this is weird, this is ancient, this is backwards, this is wrong in some way. So it does tap into that.
Though arguably you could say that it's not intended to be actual Hellenism. It's intended to be the crew of the Enterprise kills Yahweh, but we made it Apollo to get by the censors.
I mean, that's a valid reading as well. I can absolutely see that. And there's a lot of things I noticed watching it that are very Catholic. Like, definitely a Catholic, or at least a Lutheran, had a hand in writing this.
Well, here's the thing. You made a comment about the spelling of the title.
Yes, I did. Adonis.
Yeah, yes, you said that is not how you spell Adonis, but it is how you spell Adonai.
Yes. And also, like, the title makes, unless you are looking at it through a Christian lens, the title makes no sense.
Yeah.
Because Adonis has very little to do with Apollo in Hellenism. Like, they are two very separate things. And I honestly don't know enough about Adonis to actually, like, I'm quite familiar with Apollo. I'm not particularly familiar with Adonis. You know, and it's one of those things where is this Gene Roddenberry killing God? But then some of the lines he puts into his protagonist's mouth,
Yeah.
like, you could have gotten away with putting those in the mouth of someone who didn't have the on-screen weight of Captain Kirk.
Now, that being
Got
said,
them by the senses.
this is season 2, episode 2.
Yeah.
Of the.
Is it that early in it? Is it?
Yeah. So arguably, it's probably still early enough that William Shatner still had a lot of leverage over how the script was written.
Yes.
Hence the Christian
and
references.
that comes across. That very much comes across. This script very much does look like someone wanted to kill God, and William Shatner said, "No, I'm not doing it."
Yeah.
Like, if you look at it from that way, it does look like there was a bit of creative battle in there over the ending, particularly the ending of this episode.
Yeah,
it certainly feels like the one God is enough line was very much thrown in there.
Yeah.
Yes, there's very much a William, like, that was very strange. Especially because Starfleet is reasonably atheistic even at this point.
Well, yeah, I mean, it accepts religions of other cultures and even cultures within Earth, but it doesn't stipulate a religion, so it doesn't promote one. So it's scientific more than religious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very much
that's the mandate of Starfleet. It's more scientific than even more than so the military. It's more scientific.
Yeah, I mean, Starfleet's mandate and Starfleet's culture doesn't really grant any religion supremacy. And if anything, it doesn't even give space for religion within its ranks, because how can you be an entirely science-based organization that is going out into the stars to explore and believe in this puny Earth god? Like, it doesn't track.
Yeah, I mean, if you can turn around and say, "Oh, you've got these ancient, powerful beings that look like gods to early things," then you're going to have the same thought about that about any god.
Yeah. It's like if Apollo's on a planet somewhere, why is Yahweh not on a planet somewhere? Why is
Probably Kolob. Sorry.
Yeah. Mormonism jokes.
But why is Buddha not out there somewhere? Why is it doesn't make any sense.
It's a throwaway line just to pat the egos of Christians, so Christians didn't get upset about the concepts.
Well, also,
I mean, to be fair, Christians get upset about Star Trek on a weekly basis.
They do.
I like, the more I think about it, given how we know William Shatner is, I think that was probably more William Shatner being William Shatner.
Yeah. I'm not going to kill God unless you give me a line that says I love God.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the God can't be the Christian God. It has to be a different God.
Yes, it has to be a dirty pagan.
Yeah.
It has to be a dirty pagan God.
Yeah, and so
they can't do a modern religion because then they will piss off people of the modern religion. So they go ancient.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
so there's actually discussing this as a throwaway line right at the start of the episode, where they're, as usual, they find the planet and everyone's giving their reports, and there's a line where one of them says there's no intelligent life on the planet.
Yeah.
Did either of you pick up on that?
Yeah.
Like right at the start it says there's no intelligent life.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, define intelligence.
Yeah, so presumably in this case, I think it's more of a way to say there's no significantly technologically advanced species on the planet.
I mean, we're talking about a species that's got an extra organ that can, fire electric through its fingers. I think sufficiently advanced technology, yes. Because that's what this entire episode is exploring. It's that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable, in this case, from miracles, from godhood, from magic.
Yeah, Arthur C. Clarke's famous statement. Yeah.
Yeah, Arthur C. Clarke, very famously. And therefore, if the but if humanity then advances, the technology must remain sufficiently advanced.
Yeah.
Whereas by the time they get to it in 5,000 years, and even now looking at it from a modern day, what's essentially, come on, let's be honest, it's an electric generator.
Yeah.
That's what that is. It's an electric generator. In the temple, it's the size of the temple, so it's fucking big. This thing can produce lightning, it's not small.
Yeah.
And then we've got a creature that's got something akin to an electric eel, because that's name dropped in the episode for no good reason.
Yeah.
That can draw
he's got a special organ that can conduct electricity. He's got a built-in lightning rod.
Oh, and he also grows when his blood's up.
Yeah,
there are way too many phallic references in this episode.
Well, I mean, not electricity. It's an energy.
Look,
it's an unspecified energy.
Okay, look, Ray. It creates lightning, makes people tingle, affects their neurological system such that their arm is temporarily frozen, and like it's electricity. It's electricity.
Well, also generates a force field, and
again, it's electricity.
Makes it look like a hand, so it does holographs.
Yeah.
It might be magnetism at a push, but it's electricity.
Yeah.
It's like the hand is definitely just a magnetic.
Can I just bring up towards the end where our Mary Sue has rejected Apollo because it's her orders to do it, and it's the benefit of the human race. Well, at least the part of the human race that are on the Enterprise at the moment. When she's running away from him, and he gets all aggro and lightning and everything at her, did that come off date rapey to everyone else?
Yes. Also, the fact that she's covered in soot and looks shell-shocked afterwards, that just came across full-on rapey.
Yeah.
It did, full-on rapey, yeah. Good.
And I mean, to be fair, the whole thing's full-on rapey because she, she was so stupid in this episode, there's no way he's not using some kind of god magic to take control of her mind.
Oh, yeah. I was thinking he definitely roofied her.
She's been roofied or something, the way she's giving him the puppy dog eyes.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, this is the original series Star Trek. Like, every woman, aside from, Uhura, is basically a bimbo.
Yeah.
Okay, but let's be honest.
Roddenberry thought women of the future would just bend over backwards for every man they met.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Roddenberry himself was very much a misogynist.
Oh yeah, no. But the thing is as well, and I will say this so you two don't have to. So you two pasty white people don't have to. The reason Uhura is not shown as a man, is not shown as a woman and a bimbo, is because she's black. Like, that's the difference between Uhura and all the other women. She's black. And I say that knowing full well I'm pasty, I need to catch some sun, but I'm not naturally white, folks.
Yeah.
But I will say it's Uhura is made masculine because she's black. It's like this whole thing of, it's the loud black
for the time it was made.
That was incredibly
actress in the show was progressive.
Yeah.
Yeah. The idea that black people could go to the stars. Massively progressive.
And it's...
But,
well, and the thing is, her masculine traits, especially in this episode, is basically just competence. She's competent.
Yeah, soldering badly.
Sorry about that. You don't know what I was doing there. I was having to adjust something because of stupid electrodes.
Oh, okay. Yes. But yeah, you get that, and then you get speaking of misogyny, let's discuss the all women will quit the service and go get married comment.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's so close to the beginning of the show too. One day she'll find a really nice man and she'll leave Starfleet and have children and
And then Bones is like, wouldn't that be a shame? And Kirk's like, I don't view it as losing an officer, I view it as gaining a mother or something. And it's like,
to be fair, William Shatner is that in real life. He is that misogyny even now.
I mean, even worse now because he's also transphobic now, isn't he?
Yeah, but I think he was homophobic when they made the show as well. I can't imagine he was any different.
I bet it absolutely killed him that the first major fandom ship in internet history was Spurk. I bet that kills him every time. I bet that eats him up and chews him up and spits him out. It's like the first / fanfictions were Spurk. Back when they were doing zines and handing them out at cons in the 80s.
Yeah.
On paper. So yeah. I really hope that haunts him. I hope he needs a good cup of Horlicks to sleep at night knowing that.
He is so out of tune with everything that bad.
I mean, that
it's a curse of Kirk though. It's like everyone who plays Kirk is like this right wing Christian or Catholic, very backwards for the time they're in.
I mean, there is one thing that can be said, the one thing that I will say in the Trek versus Wars discussion is the cast of original Wars largely seems to be more wholesome than the cast of the original Trek.
Oh, way
and that
more
is
wholesome.
mostly on William Shatner's shoulders, dragging everything else down.
Yeah.
Yeah. But also, like, Trek was more diverse at the time.
Yeah.
You had Japanese American, you had
Yeah.
African American, you had a Russian in there.
Hey,
The less said
Russian.
about Chekhov. Yeah, the less said about
I'm
Chekhov.
sorry if you're gonna. That doesn't count as diversity when you're going to get somebody to play a Russian character and then give them an accent that isn't even Russian and
It's not
is just
Russian.
a parody
I think
of being Russian.
it is a bad parody of every 80s spy movie.
It is.
If,
He is.
you know,
He is the parody of being a parody. That's what he is.
you know what he's a parody of? You know, have you ever heard of the Cambridge spy ring? And like, there's these 4 spies in the UK who were found out to be Russian spies in like the 70s or 80s.
Yeah.
And one of them, the way he convinced people he wasn't a spy was by going round and telling people that he was a Russian spy and inviting them to his Russian summer home. And people just thought he's got to be like, he got away with that for nearly 15 years. Because people just thought if he was actually a Russian spy, he would not be saying that shit. It's like the best double bluff. It's like that's the best double bluff of the 20th century.
Yeah.
Like that's up there with Kennedy claiming he's going to fire on Cuba.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Brilliant.
You know, proper with some real brinkmanship going on there. But yeah, Chekhov's accent, less said about that, the better. It's the funny foreigner, isn't it?
Yeah.
And he's the token Russian too. He's, almost everyone on board the Enterprise is American.
Yeah, but I think that's the thing. That's the space race, isn't it? What that is quietly saying is America won the space race, and we allow the Russians to occasionally put someone forward if they are very good. Because we look at us, how kind we are, how reasonable we are that we didn't blow Russia entirely off the map. Like that's what that's insinuating there. That America won the space race and therefore controls Starfleet.
Although to be fair, Star Trek started before the space race was over. So
yeah,
exactly. But that's what it was saying. That it was trying to
we
project
are going to win, not that we have one. We're going to.
Yeah, it was trying to project that future of American supremacy in space.
Yeah.
And I don't think anyone would deny that. I don't even think Gene Roddenberry would deny that. That's exactly what that was.
I don't know that was Gene Roddenberry's intent himself, because despite the misogyny that's evident in his early works and everything, he was a product of his era. But he was
very much
for his era. He was pretty progressive. So
I'm absolutely not saying he wasn't. The fact that he had a black woman in a technical role, like you would get to the early 2000s before that was normal again.
Yeah. First interracial kiss on TV in the US was on Star Trek.
Yep.
Yeah, even though it doesn't really count because Kirk kissed everyone.
Kirk kissed aliens. You want to talk interracial or talk?
Yeah.
Interspatial.
Yeah.
Like there's a reason Kirk bait is a term.
Yeah. Yeah,
but yeah, so there's a lot of commentary in this episode, and coming at it from the ex-Catholic perspective.
Yeah.
There's a lot of so right early on in the episode, Apollo tells them that they will pour sacramental wine and play music of the pipes. Look, I don't know if Christians do sacraments, but sacramental wine is basically Catholic for the Eucharist.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that was what I would mean for a lot of Christians.
Yeah.
And you don't get sacramental wines.
You don't get sacraments in ancient Hellenism. You don't get sacraments full stop. You get libations poured out for the gods.
Yeah.
But the idea of sharing of it being sacramental of that level of no. It's not a sacrament. It's just something that's done as part and parcel of everyday worship. There's no sort of special events in your life that you mark by doing that.
Yeah.
There's no special first time you pour a libation for the gods or anything like that. That's just there's no rite of passage into it. So it's not sacramental. And this music of the pipes famously in Hellenic and Roman myth created by Pan, which is why the immediate don't send down the one with the pointy ears. He reminds me of Pan and Pan bores me. But you will play the pan pipes for me. It's just fucking hilarious.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. I don't know if it was deliberate, but it is hilarious.
Given the way that it's referenced and that it's Spock being like him, and I know you brought up before that his ears like the horns, but it's in every other possible conceivable way. Spock is nothing like Pan.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. There's the irony of that as well. Pointed ears can look like horns, and Pan is sometimes.
Actually, so the Spock Pan thing it can arguably be a bit of reverse syncretism.
Mm-hmm.
Because in other episodes where they go down to, or the episodes where they get stuck in the in Earth's past, or they go down to a more primitive but still somehow Christian planet, people
like that one where they got stuck in the Wild West.
Yeah, people see Spock's ears and they think he's the devil.
Yeah.
And
of course, a lot of devil imagery is pulled directly from Pan.
Yeah.
Which is ridiculous because Pan's not a devilish character at all.
No, Pan is the creator of wine.
Yeah. He's the god of fun, technically.
Yes, he's the god of fun and getting pissed and getting high and having fun. And he's for those who are actually yes, and I mean for those who are actually Hellenic polytheists, Pan is the Roman name for Dionysus. So why Apollo would call him Pan anyway?
Yeah.
It makes no sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, he does that. That's done quite a bit. The intermix that they did between Roman and Greek mythologies and architecture.
Yes.
Was just like, this does not make sense.
Yeah.
I still very much hold on to my theory that Gene Roddenberry wanted to kill Yahweh, and either William Shatner or the censors, or probably a combination of both, wouldn't let him. So he drew up, so he dressed Yahweh up in a toga and called it classical.
But let's face it, Gene Roddenberry revisited that in Star Trek 4, where they go to the center of the galaxy and meet the great big head thing that was supposedly the being that was the inspiration for Yahweh.
So he's gone from polytheism to pantheism in 4 seasons. Took humanity 2,500 years.
Well, 3 seasons and 4 movies, but yeah, who's counting?
Yeah, so this is based in what? The 24th century.
Yeah.
And they're claiming that they were on Earth 5 centuries ago.
Yeah, so
what they're essentially
millennia.
I'm sure he said 5,000 years.
He said 5,000 years.
Yeah, which is a millennium.
Oh yeah,
a century is 100.
Oh yeah, sorry, my mistake. So 5,000 years, which would put them on Earth in medieval times.
No.
Are they suggesting that they left when Rome collapsed?
1,000 years BC. So they're in the 24th century.
In the year 2420 or whatever.
It was, yeah.
5,000 years before 2420.
would be the 3rd millennium BC.
Yeah.
Mid-3rd millennium BC.
But it doesn't really work because the Greek gods date earlier than that, so they'd have to have been. And they lived well after that, so they must have lived well after that if they were there. So
again, I'm not a historian of historiography, but I would think in the 80s, like this is pre the finding of Troy. So they would assume the deities were Mycenaean. He talks about Homer, Herodotus. He talks about Homer, Odysseus, and who was the last one he name drops? Achilles. Those are all Mycenaean names, i.e., they are pre-ancient Greece. They are Mycenaean stories. Therefore, the fact that he mentions Hercules, that dates him into ancient Greece. So is he like? I'm trying to put a timeline of when these gods disappeared, because he says these gods left after they stopped being worshipped.
Yeah.
But from the things he says, it reads more like they left when the Romans invaded Greece. Is a more accurate timeline, just based on the things he's saying.
Which would be a fair sort of somebody who doesn't understand their literature to think, oh, when the Romans got to Greek, the Greeks stopped worshipping their gods, which is never how the Romans worked, because the Romans didn't insist other people take on their religion when they invaded them.
No, they didn't. And, there was a lot of syncretism going on and all those other things. But that is exactly what Christianity does. It's exactly what Christianity did. It's exactly what Islam did. It's exactly what... Well, no, Judaism never did that. But it's exactly what Christianity and Islam did.
Oh, yeah.
So he's obviously someone with a worldview based in monotheism. Yeah. And when I say monotheism, I mean late monotheism, i.e. Christianity and Islam.
I fail to see how Christians can call themselves monotheists. It doesn't make sense, Christians calling themselves monotheists. They have 3 gods.
Catholics and Lutherans. But the way they have 3 gods is very weird. They have
they're
3
gods, but they're the same god.
It's do you know what it is? That is that Trinity. It's the Trinity of Diana, Persephone, and Hecate. It's the Hecate Trinity, but it's masculinized. That's my. I'll be spicy. I'll be spicy. Christianity is just
That's a spicy noodle.
And I mean, aside from that, if you're going to say, okay, you've got these 3 head gods that are really one god, but they're actually separate gods, and then you've got all these angels underneath, which are basically minor deities.
Mm-hmm.
You have a pantheon. You are not monotheistic in any way.
And then you have your saints and martyrs, who are essentially your Christianized heroes.
And you've got a god of the underworld.
Yeah.
You've got a freaking devil.
Yeah, you've got a god of the underworld. But don't forget, he's an angel. He's a minor deity.
He's still a minor deity. He's still a god of the underworld. In that sense. And God isn't powerful enough to just beat him on his own. He can't do that. There's plenty of evidence of that in the Bible, that God cannot just take him off the board.
But this is the thing, though, with the Christian God, isn't it? It's like the Christian God supposedly created the devil, but then couldn't beat him in a fair fight.
Yeah.
There's a message there about not letting AI get too powerful.
Yeah.
Am I wrong? Am I wrong though?
No, you're right. You're right. This is a case of don't build something better than yourself.
Don't build something you can't beat in a fair fight. Don't build something without an off switch.
Yeah.
But yeah, Apollo's very, very like Old Testament. And I say Old Testament because that's what I'm familiar with, but he's very Old Testament.
And I mean, arguably, the quote about the Sacramento wine.
Oh, you're frozen.
that does come from the Old Testament.
Yeah, a lot
Like,
of the lines
you
that
know,
Apollo comes out with do come from the Old Testament and come from Catholic masses and
But
things.
to be fair, the Old Testament steals a lot of its lines from other religions. So
Yeah, I mean, like the Old Testament is basically just the Torah cherry picked.
and a lot of the passages in that were stolen from Mesopotamia and Babylon and that. So like.
Were they stolen? Were they borrowed? Were they inherited? Yes.
Inherited. Yeah, borrowed and inherited. However you want, they evolved. Christianity evolved from these earlier religions, and that's always happened in religion. All religions have evolved, just like you have Mormonism evolved from Christianity now. The same things happened.
Yes, but Mormonism is the problem child no one admits to having and doesn't invite.
But tell me this. If Mormonism came from Christianity, why are there still Christians?
Is that a question you just want to ask Eric Hoven?
Oh gosh. Someone call Saint Ron. I've got an answer for his evolution question. But yeah, so there is this thing where they've got this woman and she's quote unquote a specialist in ancient history and archaeology of Earth. Why she's with Starfleet, I have no idea. Did they really like? I mean, obviously they did, but what were the odds they were going to find an ancient Greek temple in the middle of like?
Well, I mean, given how often they stumble across planets that are just, literally Earth history, but different.
Oh,
this
okay.
Is where Stargate did this better, because at least they gave a reason why human mythology was transplanted across the galaxy, and it made sense to have experts in human history to go out into the stars, but it doesn't in Star Trek at all.
So we have what is essentially carbon-based life forms. So by creating a show, now correct me if I'm wrong, but if you create a show in which you explore the universe and keep running across carbon-based life forms that are on the exact same trajectory of the planet you've come from, but at different stages, surely there's an insinuation there that you believe that there is only one trajectory for life and history, and therefore you don't believe in free will and you do believe in some form of all-powerful being or method that is directing the affairs of living things.
I mean, there are planets where the trajectory branched off, like for instance the fascist Romans on TV.
Yeah. And to be fair, Next Generation did answer this. But Next Generation came up with a wavy, handy explanation for why our galaxy is the way it is, and why trajectories and religions sort of came about the same way. So
our galaxy, yes, but they are well beyond our galaxy. They're supposedly well beyond our galaxy.
Yeah, this is a problem with Star Trek and its ideas of how its warp drive works, because technically Star Trek would never have had the speed to travel outside of our galaxy, but of course we didn't know how big our galaxy was when they started making Star Trek. So Star Trek is not realistic in any way, shape, or form. The ships in Star Trek universe move it. Yeah, that the speed of ships in Star Trek is the speed of making the story move.
Yeah,
it's got nothing to do with any sort of
So it's Our Lady of Blessed Acceleration. But it's
basically ships in Star Trek apparate.
Yeah, basically, it's about as scientific. Close your eyes and think really hard, and you'll get there.
The magic can't take
it's
much
separation
more
without the
I'm giving her all
anti-Semitism.
she's got.
I'm giving her all she's got, Captain. Oh, the funny thing is that sentence, I wasn't trying to put an accent on there, but an accent started to come out in my voice.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we get this archaeologist, and she lands, and she does a fairly good assessment of the environment. She says, okay, so it's a naturalistic environment with built-up areas and classical references. And she specifically says classical references, which, yes, because what that does immediately, and she says, is designed to put you in the mind of the ancient Greeks. It's not designed to look.
It's almost breaking the third wall.
Yeah, it's almost Gene Roddenberry apologizing for it not looking accurate. It's an in-text apology for not being entirely accurate. It's saying these are classical references to put you in the mind of, to make you think of. And it is an apology for coming down on the side of authenticity versus accuracy. Like that line is the okay, we know this doesn't look like actual ancient Greece, but we didn't have the money, so we're going to call it a reference. And we want you to just go with it. Please suspend your disbelief. That's what that line is.
Please suspend your disbelief, because this is not going to be accurate in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. It's like we spent all our money on William Shatner. We didn't have enough.
That's the disclaimer a certain author should put in front of everything she writes.
Yeah. But yeah, please suspend your disbelief. But that's exactly what it's doing. And to that extent, as much as I'm going to bitch and moan about how inaccurate Apollo's depiction is, yeah, because it's authentic to what a modern audience looking at it would view it as.
Yeah.
So, if you asked someone from, what year did this come out, like the 60s?
1965.
Yeah, if you asked someone in 1965 what was the ancient Greek god Apollo like, they'd probably tell you that, even without seeing this episode. So that's what Roddenberry's tapping into. He's tapping into
67.
what people. Yeah, so either way, he's tapping into what people thought the ancient Greek gods were, not necessarily what they actually were. And again, it's pop culture. It's a TV show. I don't expect more than that from it. It still winds me up a little bit, and the Catholic references, you can play a drinking game, but don't play a drinking game. Even communion wine will kill you.
Yeah.
There's a lot of them. But yeah.
We'll play a drinking game with the sacramental wine.
Yeah, maybe make a drinking, maybe play a drinking game with water, but only if Jesus isn't around.
Yeah, let's go with that. Or Pan, because Pan can also pull that trick. Leave Spock on the Enterprise. But yeah, there's the one thing Apollo offers them really early on is life in paradise. But his depiction of paradise is being goat herds and a rural pastoral life, very Jeffersonian ideals, very American. Very, old school Republican, I think, is fair to say.
Yeah.
There wasn't even a Greek concept of paradise.
I mean, you had Elysium, but that wasn't paradise. That was an afterlife.
Yeah.
And you had Mount Olympus, but that was for the gods. That wasn't for humans.
Yeah, it wasn't for that.
It was for the gods and for heroes.
For human souls.
Not even heroes could live on Mount Olympus. You had to be a full-blooded god to live on Olympus.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's a weird one.
But I mean, was Olympus even considered a paradise? Or it was the home of the gods, but it wasn't even really considered.
It was just where the gods lived. It was no more paradise than
But a concept for Greeks of something that would be a paradise would not have been tending your sheep.
No, exactly. And the thing is,
it was wine and song and drinking and eating yourself.
It was Elysium.
Stupid.
Yeah. But the home of the gods was no more paradise than the Vatican is.
Yeah.
Probably the Christian equivalent to it. It's just
Yeah, I
it
mean,
just happens to be where the seat of the religion sits.
This concept of a paradise is such a Christian thing because
Yeah,
very
I mean,
you know,
Christian.
especially
I mean,
since
look at the Norse. You die as a warrior and you go to Valhalla, where there's lots of drinking and fighting and
Yeah,
eating food.
and
That's paradise.
Valhalla is conceptually closer to Elysium than the Christian heaven.
Yeah, then the
And I
Christian
don't ever
heaven.
think Jews have a concept of an afterlife. Or if they do, I don't think they do.
They don't have a concept of a hell because they don't think there is.
I know they don't have a hell. I don't know if they have a heaven type thing.
Yeah, I'm not
If you're
exactly
Jewish or you know anyone who's
If you're
Jewish or you
tell
know,
us.
let us know.
Yeah.
Please tell us. But yeah, so it's not even a monotheist thing of paradise. It's Christian.
Yeah.
I
Most
know
of the
Muslims
imagery
have a
is
very
Christian's.
hierarchical heaven.
It's Christian imagery smattered with a Christian's idea of what Greco-Roman.
Yeah, this is ancient Greece.
Greco-Roman. It's not ancient Greece. It's Greco-Roman.
Yes, like if the columns didn't tell you it's Greco-Roman, the laurel leaves should have done. Like, why was he wearing a triumphal crown? It's like, where did you invade recently, dude? Because I don't think you got that far with the lieutenant.
And then to end it with a reference to the laurel wreath, it just makes no sense at all.
It literally no sense.
To be fair, at least the statement was made by Kirk, who actually had no idea what he was talking about with the classic stuff. So it was made completely obvious that Kirk had no idea.
But yeah, let's talk about Apollo's love life.
Rapey little shit.
Yeah, I mean, all the ancient Greek gods were.
Yeah.
And you have to understand, in Hellenic culture, there was no concept of rape as we understand it. Rape in Hellenic culture was taking a woman without her father or eldest brother's permission. Her opinion on the matter
that was more or less Christian's idea too.
Yeah, like her opinion on it had sweet essay to do with whether it was rape.
Because women didn't have rights; women were property.
Exactly, women were chattel. Therefore, the way Apollo treats the lieutenant is probably the most accurate thing about him in this episode.
She's
an
object that he wants.
Yes. Yeah. She wants him and he wants her. And this whole thing in the end, when he tries to soften him by saying, "Oh, I would have loved you, I would have cherished you, I'd have made you the mother of gods." And it's like, we have the history of Hera, we know that that's not a good...
Yeah.
It's like, yeah. You know, we know what happened to your exes, Apollo. Like, you know.
It's like it's a good thing that the crew killed him before she got turned into a flower.
It's like he talks about Daphne and Cassandra, and Cassandra, who worshipped Apollo, was a priestess of Apollo's, but then pissed him off, or depending on which version you understand and read, there was a kerfuffle, and he cursed her. And you know, she was the blind priestess, but she had the gift of prophecy. It is very, you know, he cursed her with the gift of prophecy, but never to be believed.
Yeah.
And he cursed her because she was raped by another man. Because his belief was that she should have not submitted to that, and if it did happen, she should have killed herself rather than carry on living. And she didn't do either, therefore she pissed him off as his priestess. She became his priestess, and she devoted her life to his worship. And that's the kind of behavior Apollo seems to expect here. Blind worship, even when I'm a dick to you. Because that's what he's used to.
The misogyny of the ancient world was enormous.
Yes. And it is, I think, strongly hinted that the reason the ancient world is like that is because of the existence of Apollo et al. And therefore, of course, that's how he's going to be. Um, this this idea that gods need worship like food, no.
Yeah.
The gods don't need us. The gods can do just fine and dandy without us. We are nothing more than playthings, and we are basically TV for the gods.
Yeah.
That was the Hellenic view. We are a distraction. They play with us when they get bored, and they're watchers. And that is what we're for. They don't need us. They created us because they were bored, basically. So this idea that God needs us, that the gods need us to survive.
Yeah. It's a very post-Christian idea.
Yes, it is a very post-Christian idea. And I know it's an idea that gets used elsewhere. I know Neil Gaiman's used it with the Norse deities.
Terry Pratchett used it in
Terry
Discworld.
Pratchett's used it, yeah. So, I mean, it's a fair cop. But the thing is, that's not something, so far as I know, that exists in Christianity. Like, there's nothing in Christianity that says if you don't worship God, God will die.
Yeah.
But there is this sense with Christians who like to proselytize that if they don't proselytize and they don't worship, they've done something terrible. And it is, it's neither a Christian nor a Greek idea. I've no idea where exactly it came from, but it's definitely a post-Christian concept. And if anyone has any idea where that came from, please enlighten me, because it's a fascinating idea.
Yeah.
The idea is it's the humanization of the gods. It's like the idea that the gods required rest.
I think it comes from the concept that if you take the extent that we created the gods, well, if there actually were manifestations of the things that we made, they must get their power from our belief.
Yeah.
I think that's where that comes from, and it's just a...
It's kind of a tulpa sort of thing going on.
Or, coming from the question
thing,
of why do deities require worship?
Yeah. And the point is they don't. In ancient Hellenism, the gods do not require worship. We worship the gods to keep them on side, because when they're pissed off, when they get pissy, we pay the price.
Yeah, you offer tribute to the gods so you can appease them, not to worship them per se. It's an appeasement. It's so you don't, because they're wrathful and they're going to hurt you.
It is worship and it is awe as well, but it is appeasement. And there is this thing of the gods do not require. Yeah, the gods do not require our worship, but if we worship them, they may grant us a boon. They may grant us.
Like, if anything,
and they might not destroy our crops or give us a disease.
The idea is that deities require worship to survive. Probably comes from Protestantism, where or post, is traces back to the Protestant idea that Yahweh, desperately wants a worshipful relationship with humanity.
He wants to be loved desperately, or didums.
Yeah.
He comes. Yahweh just comes across as a spoiled child, doesn't he?
Well, this is the thing, for a deity who's characterized as a father figure, which I will get onto relative to this episode in a minute. Let's put a pin in that one. Who comes across as a father figure and presents himself, or is presented as, this all-powerful father, loving father figure. He's more like the child in the relationship. He has to be appeased. He has to be looked after.
And if he doesn't get what he wants, he chucks a tantrum.
Yeah, he throws his toys out the pram.
Yeah,
and
literally.
what's the place? Literally, yeah. And it's like, child. Look, my gods don't do that. Okay, if I ignore my gods for a bit, they say, "All right, well, fuck you then. I'm not hanging around," and I go back when I'm ready. Like
Well,
the idea that if I forgot to pray to Apollo for a few days, or if I forgot to pray to even Zeus or Hades for a few days, that they'd turn my life upside down. No, that's not what they do. Why would they give a shit about one petty human being? Like they are so above and beyond humanity that the idea that the actions of one or even a city full of human beings would even register on their radar as, oh, someone left me out a sweet treat is ridiculous. It's utterly ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's like humans. I don't know what that anthill out on the grass is doing, and I don't care. That's
Having said that,
again.
as a human, you might occasionally smite the anthill if it's annoying you.
Yes, exactly. So don't annoy the gods, and they will leave you alone. That's not a bad analogy at all for that. Unlike Yahweh, who seems to think, I will poke the anthill with a stick, and when they bite me, I will step on them.
Yeah, he's a petulant child.
You are a child.
Yeah.
You are a literal child. That's what children do.
So I couldn't tell the good ants from the bad ants, so I kept smiting and I kept smiting and I kept smiting.
Pretty much.
For those of you who haven't, who didn't catch that reference, that's from an episode of Malcolm in the Middle where they go to church and Dewey's telling his Sunday school teacher about this anthill he found and about how we're like ants to God, and he just totally breaks the Sunday school teacher.
I mean, yeah, it's accurate. I've never seen that episode, but yeah.
Now I want to watch it.
I probably have somewhere in my memory, but I don't remember it.
Yeah.
So yeah, but then you've got Apollo. The way he talks, he's Yahweh in a gold toga. That's what he is. There's this idea that the gods require rest. The gods are literal beings of like pre-existence. Like they're basically antimatter in a jar. They don't require rest. Okay, like they are depictions. A lot of people, we humanize the gods, but what you have to understand about Hellenism is the statue itself was the god in the temple. Every city had its own. It was very much quote unquote worship of idols in the Christian sense. The statue was the god. The small thing you had in your pocket that you carried around was the god. Like that was but on a higher level, the understanding of the gods was these things, yes, they are the gods, but we imbue them with that. Because what the gods are is actually our pathetic, poor human attempt to personify powers beyond our control. It's like Zeus is not literally an old man on the clouds. Zeus is the power of thunder and storms and the clouds and the sky. Hades is not literally a man underground collecting souls. He's the epitome of death. He is literally lawful neutral because death is neutral and comes for us all, and there is no moral. Like death is death, and all death is the same, regardless. You can try and have a good death, but it is fundamentally
You
always
shouldn't
the
be
same.
yawning, Ring.
Yeah.
It's early for you.
You're in the wrong time zone to be yawning, Ring.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's a deeper understanding of how a lot of people take Hellenism. So the idea of it being a physical humanoid,
Yeah.
that is the god that can make itself 12 foot tall, because he's a grower, not a shower. Um, it's a very Christian view. It's just a very Christian view. It's
Oh,
like
it
Christians
is.
were the first people to make their gods actual people, like an actual
Yeah.
human being. It's like we had the Hellenism has heroes and myths and demigods, but doesn't have the idea of a human god. It's like Venus didn't literally pick Aeneas up from the battlefield in Troy. The power of love saved him. The power of his mother's love saved him. That's um, unless you're a mythical literalist, in which case, by all means, believe Venus popped down and picked him up
Yeah.
and like caused an entire war for her ship. Believe that if you like. But we're a bit beyond that. I feel like on Meiji Musings we are literate enough that we can accept that the ancient myths are mostly just stories that we told ourselves because we didn't understand how electricity and atoms worked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Or like, for instance, a bunch of boys weren't weren't literally fed to a half man, half bull monstrosity, but
Athens did send sacrifices to the people of the king of Crete.
I was gonna say, but the precursors to the Athenian city state probably did have to deal with raids done by those bullfuckers over there on Crete, who we now know as the Minoans.
Yeah, basically. And the Minoans did accept sacrifices in children who were probably enslaved and may have been cannibalized as part of their religious rites.
And
again, I'm
they
not going to
did
speak for
have,
what I don't know.
and they did have
And
a
they
lot
had
of
a lot
bulls
of
in their
holy
art.
because they probably worshipped a deity that looked or had some aspect of being a bull.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that there was a half man, half bull in a maze. No.
No, not
People
at
tell
all.
stories for things they don't know, so they pass down histories.
Yeah.
And we do it, we do it in the modern day as well. Traditionally, again, I keep mentioning Judaism. I'm not entirely sure why, but they have oral histories that they pass down. Those stories are not necessarily accurate,
Yeah.
but again, it's accuracy versus authenticity, and it's talking about deeper truths. Does it matter that it didn't exactly happen that way if the lesson of the story is passed on? It's like Grimm's fairy tales. We
Yeah.
tell those stories, but what are we actually teaching children when we tell them Red Riding Hood? We're not teaching them that there are wolves in the forest and not to talk to them and that animals can talk. We're teaching them not to talk to strangers.
Yeah.
We're teaching them to always question things. We're teaching them not to trust someone just because they're old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to be on their guard. Those lessons carry through that story. The wolf is just there. It's a story. Which is why the comment about the gods needing rest made me laugh. Because the idea that electricity as a concept needs a rest, or the idea that wind needs a rest,
To
Or
be
or
the
the
fair, though,
idea
the
that
concept that he might need recharging is fair.
okay, but the idea that death needs a holiday,
Oh, yeah.
like it's madness. It's these things that these are natural processes. It's the
Yeah.
idea that the tide's just not going to rise one day because he's too tired and he's not taking his Viagra. No,
Yeah.
you know, no. Like Neptune does not need Viagra to make the tides rise. They're going to do it anyway. Neptune is just how we described that before we understood how tides work.
Yeah.
And that's why fundamentally ancient Hellenism polytheism is it's worship of nature. It's nature worship, fundamentally. We just give it different names and personify it a bit, because that makes more sense to us than whatever the Wiccans are doing right now.
Yeah, because monkey brain likes talking to other monkeys.
Yeah, monkey see, monkey do.
Yeah.
You know, and that is it. So that made me laugh, and this is all kind of bound up in. When are we going to address the ancient alien-shaped elephant in the room?
Well, I will say something. At least Gene Roddenberry did it to a white culture.
Define white.
Yeah.
No, don't. We'll be here for hours.
I mean, that being said, and I've said this before in reference to Jack Kirby, probably will say it again. I like the Chariots of the Gods is a fun, like, it is a fun concept to play with in fiction. You know, that the big emphasis on in fiction.
Yeah, and I will say, right, I don't think, unlike Ancient Aliens, which has a very deliberate and very pointed racial element to why it exists and its origin, I don't think Gene Roddenberry was doing that with this.
Yeah.
I made the comment, but honestly, it's joking of that's how we receive it in a modern day. But I don't think, like, if he'd have done the same episode and he'd gone after Buddha, or he'd gone after something else, it would have been the exact same episode, because I think fundamentally the point of this is it's Gene Roddenberry trying to kill the Christian God and just making it something that's acceptable to the senses. I think you're right there, Rick. So it is very much a case of if he does that, and if he takes his alien life forms and puts them in history, there's not in this specific case of Star Trek. And again, I think the same with Doctor Who. There's not an element of trying to make aliens, like, even if he'd have done it with the Egyptians, and gone back to Egypt, I don't think that we would have received it that way. But that, I don't think, is A, how it was intended, and B, how it should be taken in this specific instance, because what he's clearly done is he's looked for a culture that he thought was dead.
Yeah.
Because polytheism hadn't seen the revival period in the 60s. So he picked a culture that was relatively safe, and therefore, could be lampooned.
And also had an extensive history of Christian syncretization.
Yeah, Christian syncretism. And also is considered a foundational culture of quote-unquote Western civilization.
Yeah.
And therefore what he's having a dig at is Western civilization, not another culture.
Yeah.
And he's not saying it had to be aliens because they weren't white. He's saying it makes sense that aliens would have shown up and these proto-white people worshipped them because any sufficiently advanced technology. And those are two very different messages. But I think it was worth just having that discussion out loud.
Yeah. And the whole Chariots of the God idea was popular in speculative fiction in that time, because
even up till now it still is that whole concept.
I mean, around-ish the same time, Jack Kirby was doing his stuff with Marvel and DC, and he was really big into the whole Chariots of the Gods, Ancient Aliens, using that in fiction. I'm not sure if he was, a proponent of the actual theory, but, that's the reason why Thor is so wishy-washy on whether or not he's an actual god in Marvel.
Yeah.
And that's where we get the the concepts like the Eternals and actually is because a bunch of aliens came down, did some genetic experiments on proto-humans and made immortal people that became the basis for a bunch of myths about gods and heroes over the course of history.
Why does that sound like the kind of myth that would be the founding of the Aryan race as well?
Well, that's been done as well. So.
Well, I mean, the super fast one's name is literally Makari.
Yeah. My internet's going really shocking at the moment, and I'm getting to the point that I don't think I'm going to be able to do this much more anyway. So I might go. Enjoy the rest of the show, everyone. Bye, everyone in chat.
Take care, Jen.
Bye.
Good to see you. Don't be a stranger.
I won't. Bye.
Bye.
So yeah, we discussed that. I keep making reference to the Catholic comments, so let's just fire those off one to go.
Yeah.
You've got this comment of him granting them eternal rest. Anyone who's Catholic will know the prayer, the eternal rest. It's a prayer said for the dead. And the fact that he offers them paradise and peace, and he's very much he's offering them death.
Yeah.
Like it's not even like Christianity is a death cult, but this superimposes that concept onto Hellenism. Hellenism was not a death cult. Christianity, I think it is. Like the more I learn, like the more I know about Christianity, it's a death cult. Like you're trained from a young age to not fear death and to want to die and go to heaven.
So that being said, that there is a really interesting philosophical point being made here.
Is paradise possible in life?
No.
And also, one man's paradise is another man's hell.
Not what I'm getting at. So, he offers them, eternal rest, which is a reference to, a Catholic prayer for the dead. But, what he wants, what he wants from them is to live a pastoral, stagnant life, just being sheep herders and worshiping him.
Which is philosophically conceptual to death for explorers and scientifically advanced cultures. It is a philosophical death. It's the death of exploration. It's the death of everything they stand for.
It is
of their culture and their values.
Yeah, it is the antithesis of what they're all about, because it is, a perpetual stagnation. It is an eternal rest.
It's a form of death, yeah. And it's this thing, he offers them time without end. Now that's a line from the Catholic Mass as well. And it's I vaguely remember a prayer from when I was a child, but I can't remember what it was. A world without end, time without end. It is essentially a Catholic children's prayer again, for the end of the day,
Yeah.
There's bits in the Mass where it's, a world without end, one holy, universal, apostolic church. You've then got the idea of when she says to him, the thunderbolts you throw. Again, Apollo didn't throw thunderbolts, Zeus did. But yeah. All of that very Catholic. And just the way he speaks and the way he holds himself, he's very Catholic in just the way he projects his voice, the way he speaks, like you notice it, like Christian pastors have this way of speaking that's very hypnotic.
Yeah.
And usually it's quite high paced, but it's got beats to it, and it's quite quick. Catholicism, Catholic priests speak very differently. They speak very slowly. They seem to be very careful. Like it's hypnotic in a different way. So Christianity gets you geared up, and like I've been to Christian services, it gets you geared up, gets you emotional. Like the words are coming so thick and fast you can't possibly think through them. It's very charismatic. Whereas Catholicism relies on false gravitas. Like anyone can sound good if they step back and they slow down and they speak like this in very careful and considered phrases with lots of beats and pauses that fall into a rhythm and lull you to sleep so you're not thinking.
And perhaps talk a bit sonorously like one Alan Rickman.
Yes. If you've got the voice for it, that also helps, but you don't need the voice for it if you know the methods. And the Catholic Mass, like they read it out of these giant ass books, and there are commas in place of where they're supposed to breathe as they're reading and things. It's like you get to the point, if you go to enough Catholic Masses, you get to the point where you can recite along with it, and 9 times out of 10, especially once you get used to a certain priest, you can go along with his rhythm.
Yeah.
And you can follow his rhythm as well.
Yeah.
And the rhythms don't vary as much as you would think they do. So you give 10 people the same passage to read without any commas, they're probably going to break at approximately similar places. But Catholic priests, very much it's dun dun. It's like dun dun. And it is designed to lull you into that sense of rest, that sense of calm. You've got to realize that Catholic churches are always usually, they're old buildings. They've got that. They've got the atmosphere of walking into an old library.
Yeah.
So combine that with the voice and the beat, it lulls you, it shuts off that part of your brain that thinks consciously. And so you're just more open to it, and it's like hypnosis. Um, I've been to Catholic services after I stopped believing in Catholicism, and I just sit there and I'm just, once you know what you're looking for, it's ridiculous, and you think, how can anyone fall for this? But as with most things, as with most propaganda, as with most ideologies, if you don't know what the methods of it are, you're gonna fall for them.
Yeah.
And that's not a moral failing. That's you haven't been taught not to listen to the Catholic priest while he drones on. The standing joke in Catholicism is that, mass goes on for 3 hours and everyone's tired. You're not supposed to eat breakfast before you go to a Catholic mass.
Yeah.
So you're hungry. It's first thing in the morning, you're still tired. You've not eaten breakfast or drunk anything. You've not had coffee. You've not had tea. Your brain is definitely not firing on all cylinders anyway. Then they put you in this environment where it's candles and it's all thing, and then they play you the loud, rousing organ music, and you get this man talking at you like a lecturing you basically, because it's the same speech patterns as some university lecturers, and your brain just switches off. Your brain absolutely switches off, and you just stop paying attention to what you're hearing, but you do absorb it. It's like I can probably close my eyes now, and if someone started me off, I could probably recite large blocks of the Catholic Mass as I knew it. Like to the point where if I see Catholic Masses on TV and they get the wording wrong, I know immediately.
Yeah.
Like I know, and the wording has changed since I left Catholicism. So even like when I had to go to a funeral, I was like, "That's not the right word. When did that change?" Because it's different, and it's so ingrained. and it is that speech pattern that he uses in this. So I think it's really interesting to just have the discussion about that. Because I mean, for example, Ring, your local pastor, like when we went to when we appeased your mother by going to a Christian service. His speech pattern was more American. Like at the time, I thought that was American, but it's not. It's just charismatic Christian. It's how they do it. And again, if you ever go to like a Baptist service, it's different again. But they all have the same method of they get you into a rhythm. So it's like when you're listening to a song, and if you hear the song enough, you stop hearing the words, and all you hear is the rhythm.
Yeah.
And so you don't care what the words are, but you will find eventually, if you listen to it enough, you can recite the words, even if you don't know what they are and don't know what they mean. You can recite them. How many people look back on songs from their childhood and are like, did I really sing that out loud? And it's about sex or it's about drugs or something.
Yeah.
Because that's it is, and it's a musicality to it. And that's, it's an interesting thing. Pay attention not just to the stories you're told, but how you're told them. Those things matter. But speaking of that, I think our next point to make is we've already made the comment about how he claims that they've outgrown polytheism, but then they hammer that home again at the end of the episode.
Yeah.
When he tells Apollo, "We've outgrown you. We don't need you." One is plenty, and it's like, I mean, we said all we're going to say on that. I do want to talk about the death scene because there's a few things. First of all, the idea that a god can be killed because they're not loved. It's like, oh, well, where are you going with that, buddy?
Yeah.
It's not that simple at all. But it does feed into a Christian mentality of proselytization.
Yeah.
Christians believe that they can truly convert people by proselytizing. And they can draw people away from these quote-unquote false gods. Then it tracks that they believe that drawing people away from those false gods will eventually destroy their power base.
Yeah.
But
now, of course, whether or not, whether those false gods are merely non-existent or actually demons depends on the sect you're talking about.
Yeah. I mean, in Christianity, they just don't exist. In Catholicism, they just don't exist.
Pentecostal
I learned more about demons.
Yeah, Pentecostal, they're demons.
See, I learned more about demons and shit than watching and angels and stuff. It's like the whole idea of angels and demons and hierarchies in heaven, and that's not taught in Catholicism. It's like it's there, and like we have, they had like the paintings on the walls, Renaissance art, and they dipped into that, and they dipped into Milton for that, and they dipped into Dante for that, but the idea that it's like the only two angels appear in Catholicism.
Yeah.
Technically three. The angel who does the Annunciation, which is Gabriel.
Yep.
And the angels who are in the tomb when they find it open.
Yeah.
Who tell the women, go and tell that the tomb is empty.
Yeah.
And they are not referred to. Well, Gabriel's referred to as an angel, but the others are not. And it's just not something that's a common, like it's not a major element of the religion.
Yeah.
In the way I get the impression it is in Christianity.
Yeah.
It's like there are angels in the Old Testament, and they appeared more in the Old Testament, but the way it was taught to me, and again, I say this under advisement because I was taught by Roman Catholics. The way it was taught to me was God didn't need to send angels in the New Testament. Jesus was already on earth spreading his message.
Yeah.
You don't need messengers when you're already there.
Yeah.
How accurate that is, again, take it with a pinch of salt, folks. But that was the mentality in the Catholicism I grew up in, of the idea of angels and demons and things. Like, I was utterly horrified to the core when I learned that there are people who are exorcised in day-to-day life. Like, when you told me you've been exorcised, I was like, no. Like, it's like Catholic priests can and will, when you're moving to a new home, they'll come to the house for you, and for an undisclosed fee, i.e., you give them a plain white envelope, they'll bless your house for you. And the idea of that is, if anyone's died there or anything terrible's happened there, it's cleaned. It's now safe.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the idea of the exorcist, in horror movies comes from. But the idea of exorcising a human being, that's just the level of religious nuttery required to believe that that's something that's needed in the 20th and 21st century. It's like, yes, they did it in medieval times. And the Vatican still has an in-house exorcist. But you do realise that most of the people who they thought had demons in them were probably just epileptic. Or had some form of schizophrenia. And therefore the idea that you would exorcise someone, especially in the era of modern medicine and modern understanding of what these symptoms are, you're strange. Like, you Christians, it's like, I don't know what wine they're drinking, but water it down some more.
Actually, all the churches I went to growing up, it was just grape juice.
But it's very literal. It's like, and that's the thing that I always had the opinion of when I was Catholic. Looking at Christians, they had a very literal viewpoint on the Bible. They took it very literally and very seriously and very uncritically.
Yeah.
And the Catholic viewpoint is, a lot of it is stories we told ourselves to explain or to teach deeper lessons.
Yeah.
Which also means that the Catholic Church can then cherry pick what it wants to be real and what it doesn't at any given point it pleases.
Yeah.
But that's the point of view it pushed. But then equally, they then like pushed that the bread literally turned to flesh. So they're no better than the Christians. They're just weird in a different way.
Yeah.
But the idea, the reason I brought that up is because I want to talk about this quote unquote funeral rite. So they destroy the temple, and the temple goes up in flames and is magically turned into ruins because Star Trek.
I took it as, technical limitations not being able to adequately show the phasers melting down the...
Yeah. I think it's a combination of that, and it's, look, yes, they are ancient and ruins, like they should be. You work with what you've got. And this after he's promised that he's going to create a new race of gods. And then he walks to the temple and he starts to list off the names of Greek deities. He says Hera, Zeus, Artemis. And the one he doesn't evoke, weirdly considering the fact that he's essentially committing harikari, is Hades.
Yeah.
Now, there is a reason. Or there may be a reason, an extra-textual reason. You can read this into it if you want, or you can just maybe Roddenberry didn't want to invoke a deity that's the closest to the Christian devil. Who knows? Hades in Hellenism and in ancient Greek thought and in Roman thought as well, you would not have used his name. Very much like he who must not be named. Persephone the same. You called them by epithets. Zeus was, Hades was, the Zeus of the underworld, the father of the dead, the keeper of, the various epithets you can find, epithets even. Persephone the same. She was the dread queen of the underworld. She was not Persephone. She was, the maiden, not Persephone, because you didn't say her name. Because when you say the gods' names, you get their attention. And you don't want the attention of the god of death?
Yeah.
Makes sense. You don't want the attention of chthonic deities in general. So you don't say their names like
Instead
that.
of a lady, you would have a queen, terrible as the dawn.
I mean, that's probably a more accurate depiction of Persephone than, she's not Uwu little flower princess, and anyone who tells you otherwise clearly hasn't done the reading. So he doesn't evoke Hades, which is very interesting because of all the ancient Hellenic deities, Hades is probably the one, other than Hermes, because he's just everywhere. And I mean everywhere. I don't understand how you could be on the side of a car tire on the side of a hospital, Hermes. You're confused. You're drunk. Go home. Hermes, you're drunk. Go home. Tell Pan he gave you too much wine. It's
Yeah.
This is the of all the deities, Hades is the one who would be consistently fed throughout history because he takes payment in human life.
Yeah.
And people never stopped dying. So I don't know what's going on with that. But this idea that it's a funeral rite and it's a return to the cosmos, again, the ancient Greeks didn't bury their dead, they cremated them. So you can see why a Christian lens looking at cremation would go, oh, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, return to the cosmos. So yeah, the main thing to take from this episode is Apollo isn't Apollo, Apollo is Yahweh.
Yeah.
There's a few fallacies in there. They really like their reduction to absurdity, don't they?
Yeah.
This final line, which I'm sure you have some commentary on, Ring, because I've talked for a bit now.
Yeah. Well, I actually missed the last line because I was busy getting set up.
So they've done this entire episode. They've fought against him. They've brought him down.
Yeah.
And then just as they're about to leave, the camera focuses in on Kirk, and he says, "But would it really have been so terrible for us to collect a few laurel leaves?" Yes, because you know full well that the gods told you to collect laurel leaves as a symbol of worship and of giving up and of stopping exploring and of going back to the Stone Age. Yes, it would have been that bad.
Yeah.
Because that's essentially, that is basically undercutting the entire episode. And the message of the entire episode up until that point is, no, we must progress forward. We must leave ancient superstitions in the past. We must not fall victim to the mentality that any sufficiently advanced technology is magic. We must not worship those who are not worthy of worship. We must not worship things just because we don't understand them. These are all good messages. And then it undercuts it with that final line from the captain who says, "But would it have been so bad if we did it?"
Yeah.
So, yes, that's the entire point up until this episode.
Yeah.
Oh.
I have a feeling that was a Shatner edition.
Yes, it definitely feels like it. That and when Apollo says, "You will worship me, you will worship the gods," and he's like, "Yeah, we've found one adequate."
Yeah.
Although I do like that it's we found one entirely adequate, and not we find one,
Yeah.
like maybe because I'm British, but when you call something adequate, that's a really backhanded compliment.
Yeah, that's because you're British.
Yeah. Okay.
But and also this is, of course, Star Trek stock plot number 534, where the crew commits deicide.
Yeah. But yeah, no, it's like it's the I don't know, because for me in Britain, if someone tells you something is adequate, that means it's barely passing. Like it's barely scraped 50%. It's adequate. It will do. That'll do. That'll do, pig. That'll do. It's adequate. It's not. It's not even on nodding terms with decent.
Yeah.
It's like in America, when you say something is quite good, I mean something is very good in America. In British, if you say something is quite good, you're saying it's good, but it's only just good.
Yeah.
It's like it's quite good. It's only a little bit good. It's like it's not good enough to just be called good.
Yeah.
That's what quite means. It's like it's a minimizer, whereas in American English, it's an emphasizer. I don't know what's going on there. But yeah, and adequate is the same way.
Yeah.
It's like adequate is 48% on a test if the passing grade is 50.
Yeah.
Like adequate's like anywhere between 48 and 52% is adequate.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. And speaking of things that are adequate, one thing I do want to point out, there is a line in this episode that I really hope I never have to hear on TV again. When Apollo takes the girl, Scotty calls him a dirty Saracen. Like, I had to double check that that's what he said, because not only is that term outdated, it's incredibly racist.
It's also
I would
wrong.
say it's also wrong. It's not Scottish. It's not like a word that's translated into Scottish and then carried on. And frankly, I've said it once and I don't want to say it again because it tasted like a slur coming out of my mouth and I don't like it. That term is a Crusade era term for Muslims and Arabs.
Yeah.
So, I mean, insofar as he's using this episode to have a pop at Christianity, ancient polytheism, I mean, at least he included the Muslims as well.
Yeah.
Like, he's clearly, like, of all the insults to come out with, buddy.
Yeah, and this is the, only of the, while this is one of many episodes where the crew just, straight up commits deicide, this is the only one where it's the deity has a recognizable analog to any Earth religion.
Mm.
So it is very much I like the more we talk about it, the more I'm certain that Gene Roddenberry just wanted the crew to kill the Abrahamic God,
but couldn't get away with it.
But couldn't get away with it.
So yeah, I think that's what this is. This is classical reception, but I think this is more than anything, it's Christianity wrapped up in classical reception. It's a great little episode for Star Trek. It's got its issues. I refer you to Scotty and his insults.
And,
and the Mary Sue of a woman.
Gestures vaguely at 1960s misogyny.
Yeah. But all in all, overall, it's a good little Star Trek episode. I like that it very early on apologizes for the lack of accuracy and then leans into it anyway.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, okay, so what you've done there is gone, hey, yeah, we know it's not accurate. We don't want you to care because we don't. That's not what we're doing here. And you're not going to get, if you look at modern media, you are very rarely going to get anything that does that so bluntly.
Yeah.
Like, that's not subtle. Like, you are aware very early on. And I think that credit to the writers for that, because that is very much a, look, we know, but we wanted to have fun, so we're doing it.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. So from a reception point of view, I have very little criticism in that regard. Again, Apollo is not, by any stretch, the Apollo of Greek Hellenism. He is not even the Apollo of revival Hellenism, which is actually newer than this episode. So he is very much an avatar for Christian deities, dressed up in such a way that it makes it acceptable to take pot shots at him.
Yeah.
And I think it is very telling that in this episode, they don't try and take a shot at him. Like, the phasers never come out of the holsters.
No, they do.
Mm-mm.
Yep. Scotty tries to shoot him and he melts his phaser, and then all the other ones are broken.
Yeah, no, Scotty does, but I mean, of the others. And it is very much that thing.
Well, I mean, Chekhov pulled his out, but noticed that all the parts were fused.
Chekhov's gun. Chekhov's gun never fired. But yeah, and that's the thing, and it's this episode is like, anyone who watched this episode, like, if Christians got offended at this episode, I wouldn't blame them.
Yeah.
But it would depend very much on what they got offended at.
Yeah.
Like, if you got offended because the god was too much like your god and it used Christian language and then was eventually committed suicide and unalived itself, then yeah, I see your point. If you got offended because it's Greek gods and it's spiritually unhinged.
Taking your pot shot at Focus on the Family, eh?
Yeah, I pot shot straight between the eyes.
Yeah.
Then maybe we've got a discussion to be had, because, I mean, you can have the discussion, but not with me, because I ain't got time for that shit.
Yeah, because, much like the depiction of other religions is often just Christianity in a funny hat.
Yeah, that's what this
was. Christian response to the existence of other religions is very much usually just cultural superiority in a funny hat.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, there are valid criticisms of this episode from a Christian viewpoint.
Yeah.
I sincerely doubt that any Christians watching them would actually raise those criticisms, because those criticisms require an actual understanding of what's going on.
Yeah.
And what they're being shown, and of the thing that it's lampooning. It's like, to fully grasp that this is Christianity wrapped up in ancient Greek aesthetic, and then pot shots taken at it. You have to understand ancient Greece and Christianity, and be savvy enough to realize that this is not an episode that is on the side of Christianity, however much it may overtly appear to be. It's an excellent satire. It's a brilliant satire. But it's not like, you've got to understand this episode on 2 or 3 different levels to be able to grasp that it's a satire.
Yeah.
And if you don't, your criticisms are not going to land in the same way.
And funnily enough, next week we are also going to be covering a satire.
Yes. I mean, we're covering Schrodinger's satire next week.
Yeah.
It was a satire after they realized that people realized it was fascist propaganda.
I disagree on that.
No, like, it was a satire to start with when Miller wrote it.
Yes.
By the time Snyder got hold of it, it was just straight up fascist propaganda.
Yeah.
You also haven't grasped, folks. We're talking about 300. You haven't got time to read the comic, just watch the movie. You'll follow one. We'll tell you what the differences are on the day. But if you do want to read the comic, the comic is a satire.
Yeah.
And the comic's actually a very clever satire, but the movie, no.
Yeah. For those of you who are slightly confused, we started reading 300, and we're like, yeah, there's no way we're going to be able to lump Troy into this.
I mean, I probably will mention Troy as an aside, so if you've seen it once, or if you want to read the Wikipedia page on it, by all means, go ahead. Because there is one thing I'd like to discuss next week.
But
about the difference between depictions of historical and mythical warfare. But, and where 300 falls in that, because, like, the last stand at the Hell's Gates has become mythologized, largely as a result of this comic book and the subsequent movie.
Yeah.
So yeah, that should be an interesting discussion.
Yeah,
Tune in next week.
I still need to finish reading 300, and I very much feel that I need to watch Zack Snyder's 300.
Yes, I would strongly recommend you see both rings, but, like, what you need to do is you need to watch 300 and I need to watch it, and then you need to get in touch with me to make sure I haven't had an aneurysm. Because, like, I had an aneurysm even before I was into Greek history over that movie.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Or maybe we should just try and watch it together.
That could also work. That means I'll have someone to rant to. Yeah, let's do that.
But, so between finishing 300 and the graphic novel and then watching the movie, I don't think I'll have time to watch Troy.
To be fair, like, you can just switch your brain off and watch Troy. It's not high-level cinema.
Yeah.
It doesn't require much by way of thought.
Yeah. So next week, we're covering the Zack Snyder's, we're covering Frank Miller's 300, but there will be mentions about Zack Snyder. And if you'd like to get a sneak peek at how I feel about Zack Snyder, despite having not really consumed any of his media save for Man of Steel. I did do a tweet about it a couple of days ago.
And you were right on. But yeah, Zack Snyder, I have opinions.
Yeah.
As Jen said, when don't I have opinions?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a. If you watch the movie, just know that everything that happens in Sparta doesn't happen in the comic books.
And
that's at least 3 of my aneurysms right there.
And also, kind of tying into that, this week, this Wednesday, I'm going to be continuing my series on going through Pelagia's list of top 10 atheist characters, and my representation or stereotype. And instead of going on as I planned it, I figure, hey, given this whole dark satire thing, I'm just gonna do the 2 Watchmen characters in one video. And then Wednesday afterwards, I'm going to do a video comparing the This Is Sparta theme, This Is Sparta scene as presented in the graphic novel versus how it's presented in the movie.
I mean, it's pretty much shot for shot, isn't it?
Well, there's a difference, and this is where we go, the difference between accuracy and authenticity.
Yeah, because it's very accurate to how it's presented in the comic book, but it completely misses the point.
Yeah.
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 So, yeah. I mean, to be fair, the bits of the comic that make it into the movie are shot for shot. Like, they're as shot for shot as you can get with a comic book, translating it onto film.
But there's a problem with just directly, there is a problem with uncritical adaptation,
especially when the original media requires you to consume critically and makes no secret of that fact.
Yeah. And I have opinions. I have deconstructed the scene from the graphic novel in my mind over and over and over again, and I have a very what I feel it's an interesting interpretation of what is being said in this scene.
That's interesting because I have a lot of notes on that scene for next week. So let's put a pin in it. We've teased enough.
Yeah. One last little tease. In my opinion, it's not just Leonidas saying that this is Sparta.
No, it's not.
It's Frank Miller telling the reader that this is Sparta.
Yeah. That Sparta is Leonidas with all of his faults.
Yeah.
Which is like what the movie completely misses.
Yeah.
But yes. I agree.
So coming up this Wednesday, I'm going to be starting off my dark comic satire by discussing the atheist characters of Watchmen and whether or not they're a representation or stereotype. then we're going to talk 300, and then I'm going to double down on do a narrow deconstruction of a scene in 300.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I really, I almost feel like we're doing less like if I knew, like if I kind of feel like we accidentally misaligned things, but who knows? We'll probably talk about that later.
Yeah.
So with that, taglines.
Take care, be good, and if you can't be good, remember, use your noodle.
And remember, the purpose of a storyteller is not to tell you how to think, but to give you questions to think on. Too often, we forget that. And since Jen was here, and as she would say, remember, try not to choke on the selfie stick.